Welcome to Think Big with Michael Zellner. All positive, no politics. There is so much negative out there in society today, but you're not going to find any of that here. You're going to hear uplifting, positive, and motivational messages from my guests that hopefully you'll be able to take something away from it that you can apply to your everyday life. Joining me today on episode 102 is Don Freda, a man who I've known pretty much since I was a kid. He is the president and CEO of Strive Corporation, a diversified consulting and training business. He is the former president and sales trainer for collegeclub.com. Don founded Freda Enterprises back in 1977, and then the name was changed to Vector Marketing Corporation, where he was the president and CEO. And Vector actually at the time was the sole distributor sales force for Cutco Cutlery. He is a coach, a trainer, a mentor, a developer of people, and I'm really proud to say he's one of my idols. So I'm really excited to have him on today. Thanks for joining me, Don.
Michael, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, sir. What is something interesting about yourself that most people do not know?
You stumped me already, Mike.
I know you're very transparent, so yeah. To see if there's something.
I guess that I like to play poker.
Okay.
I don't know if if that qualifies or not.
Do you play often?
No, I don't anymore. I used to as a young man or as a middle-aged man. I had friends that lived in the area, and we used to play not weekly, but maybe 3 times a month. And I enjoy the strategy part of it, and the impact of randomness. As you know, I wrote a book about random events theory, and it's so much a part of life. I saw an interview with Zuckerberg recently, and he talked about how lucky he was and how things fell into place. And really, anyone that you would see that achieves greatly has taken advantage of some good luck. Now, the danger there is to say that it was all good luck, because obviously it's never all good luck. In fact, it's usually mostly hard work and all the tools that we all use to achieve. But you have to have the right circumstances presented to you. For instance, for me, just to add a little bit to the history of Vector, when I first started in the Cutco business, Cutco was a product that was sold by another company.
Right.
The company was Wherever Aluminum Incorporated, a cookware company. And the people who ran that company ran the Cutco business into the ground. They were that close to shutting it down completely. And what they decided to do was offer to all of the guys who were at my level, which was division manager, the chance to start your own company. And that's how Freda Enterprises started. And I always say, if it wasn't for those guys who, messed up the Cutco business terribly to the point where it almost expired, those people created the opportunity for me. And from the time we started Freda Enterprises, we did $750,000 our first year, which was 1980, Mike. And then from there, we went on to, as you know, over 100 million.
I know that you have good luck because, I've talked about that cruise ship, Majesty of the Seas, the Royal Caribbean, that we went on for one of the conferences. I watched you play roulette, and your numbers were 5 and 17, and you hit them.
What a memory you have, Mike. It's amazing.
Yeah, I just remember you hitting those numbers. Like, this guy has good luck around him all the time.
Well, not all the time, but I've been more fortunate than most. But roulette reminds me of somebody I wanted to mention to you, because you remind me so much of him, or you did at the time, which was, I think he's still a friend of yours, Adam Ginsberg. And I was in Atlantic City at a casino with the Canadian Joe Grushkin and Adam and Joe Cardillo, all of the Canadian managers. Joe Grushkin went up and opened up Canada for us, did a great job. And the first time I met Adam Ginsberg was at a Southern Region conference. Now, I think Adam is a little before you in the business, right?
He was a little bit before me as far as like developing and moving up in sales. Yes, he was about a year before me.
Okay, that's what I remembered. And he, Adam did amazing things. He was down there in Louisiana at school. I think it was Tulane.
Tulane.
Was it? Yeah. And, so he wasn't even living in his home territory. And, he was consistently the number one person in the push week for the Southern region. And then as Adam moved into management, my recollection is you took over that role and you had some amazing. I mean, it used to really blow me away what you young people accomplished. And you had some amazing sales performances, Mike. You really helped to inspire everyone, because if an average person comes to a conference and sees somebody do 2 or 3 or 4 times what they did, and you meet them and you say, wait a minute now, 2 arms, 2 legs, I'm a little better looking than him, you might say. And yet, they produce so much. I mean, you used to do amazing things. You used to blow me away.
And Adam and I used to talk often, and we pushed each other, to excel. And that really helped a lot, having somebody there to push you when maybe you were having an off week, to say, hey, you still got it.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't put a price on that.
Not at all. So Don, tell us a little bit about the Ramblers in 1963. I believe you were about 12 years old when you were playing football.
Did you research, Michael? The Sharon Hill Ramblers. If I had a few drinks in me, I could sing you the song, but I'm not going to do that. But I don't drink anymore, by the way. Isn't that awful? I had AFib, and they think that alcohol could adversely affect people with AFib, so I don't drink anymore. But I do miss a good glass of wine or champagne with dinner. Anyway, I never played football. We moved to a new town. This was in 4th grade, I think, 10 years old. And by the way, many of the friends that I made, and particularly one friend, a dear friend by the name of Joe McGillian, that I'm still very, very close with, actually, his company, Commercial Utility Consultants, is one of my clients. And but many good friends from 60 years of my 71-year-old life. How fortunate, how lucky. But so I learned, my dad played football. It was my dad was not highly communicative. He worked nights, and so I would come home from school and he would be at work, and I would go to bed and he would still be at work. When I got up in the morning, I was getting up before him because he didn't go to bed till 1 o'clock the night before. So I only saw him on the weekends, which I cherished, and I had a wonderful relationship with my father. But I saw there was an announcement at school about it. I had never played other than playing, touch football on the street with the kids. And so I asked him if he thought it would be good, and I went out and played with the Ramblers. There's a picture on my website, I think, of a team from, back in those times. Good, wonderful times. But I learned the basics and fundamentals of football, and I enjoyed it very much and played all the way till my sophomore year in college. I took a knock on the head, and the doctor told me that if I kept playing, I could risk very serious brain damage. And I felt like my brain was already, not at full capacity. So I stopped playing. But I love the game of football because, that's life, right, Mike? I mean, you get smacked and you got to try to keep going, keep pushing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So So the Ramblers was my, my boot camp. That's where I first learned the game.
I believe you grew up in Sharon Hill, Pennsylvania, in that area, and you went to Sharon Hill High School. You played football there. You talked about you graduated, I believe, in 1969. What are a few of the memories that you have from those years that still make you smile today?
Well, it really is all around athletics. In my senior year, I was the captain of the football team. I was the scoring champion in Delaware County. I had, I don't know, around 20 touchdowns in my senior year. Then, so the last game of football, we played a special Thanksgiving game every year with our rival town called Collingdale, literally on the other side of the tracks, the B&O Railroad. So the day after that game, I showed up. We had basketball practice. So I literally went after, a grueling football game, basketball practice the Friday after Thanksgiving, and went right into basketball. And I was a good player. I wasn't a great basketball player at all, but of all the sports I did, football, basketball, and I ran track too, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But I loved playing basketball so much so that later on in life, I actually built a gym at my house. You might have seen that. I don't know.
Yeah, I did when I came up there in 95.
Well, there you go. So, played basketball and just loved basketball. I did for love of the game. I loved football and I loved running track, but I was really trying hard to accomplish something that I did. I was state champion in the quarter mile in my senior year, and set a lot of different records, had dozens and dozens and dozens of medals. I don't know where they went, but so for me it was all around sports mostly. I really wasn't too active socially because all my time went into sports. And in fact, when I met my wife, Teresa, which is a moment that I remember very, very well, I played over and over in my mind because, again, you talk about luck. We were members of the Sharon Hill Swim Club. And I also, we're only where we live, Sharon Hill, an hour and 15 minutes from the Jersey Shore. So we used to go down the shore a lot on the weekends, me and my buddies, Rich Steele, who's still a dear friend, and Walt Zeke, who went on to become a doctor and was the valedictorian at Princeton.
Wow.
Which I almost did, Mike. So we were going down on the weekends. There was a bunch of people from Sharon Hill that had a house, and we used to bunk in. But for whatever set of reasons, this particular weekend, I didn't go to the shore with those guys. So I went with my family instead to the Sharon Hill pool. And there I am sitting on my beach chair, looking at the pool. And here comes a whole bunch of girls, most of whom I know, most of whom I went to grammar school with. Didn't know them real well, but I knew who they were. But there was this one cute little Italian chick that I did not know. And, I was paying a lot of attention to her. She was paying a lot of attention to me. And finally, at one point, I caught her eye, and I went like this, Mike. You know what she did?
That's awesome.
She gave me it back. But then I said, and she came over and sat next to me. And I was just so taken with her beauty. I remember so well her beautiful brown Italian eyes. And we really hit it off. And, I guess 8 months later, we were husband and wife. And
amazing.
Every minute of every day. And I still feel that, I'm the luckiest man in the world to have my Teresa.
I talk about a lot on podcasts when I hear stories like that about the power of a moment, how that it was a small decision at the time not to go with them. And that you went, how your whole life would have been different.
No doubt.
I mean, it's amazing like that.
Really
one thing I was just thinking about as you're talking about football, I remember you telling me a story about something with you and NFL great Billy White Shoes Johnson.
Well, we actually never played football against one another. We were together for a short while in my sophomore year of college, but we had a great rivalry uh, in track and field. He was much faster than me for a 100-yard dash. I was like 9'9" for a 100-yard dash. He was 9'7". I mean, he was incredibly fast, which of course went on to show through his great, career in the NFL. He's actually in the NFL Hall of Fame as a punt returner.
Right.
But on the track and field, without going into a lot of detail, the first time we met, it was a fifth of a mile track, if you can imagine that. Because the place where it was, these schools were small. So they didn't have room for a quarter mile. They didn't have room for a fifth of a mile. So you had to start for a quarter mile run, which was my main event. You had to start a little further down from the finish line and then come around. And then, so, they pull your spot on the track is random, your lane. And he was on the inside and I was on the outside. So a big problem for me. So he took off and I took off after him. And I got on his right shoulder as we were going around. You go in a counterclockwise motion. And so I hadn't really thought about this situation. And I just decided I'm going to try to push through and pass him because I knew I had a little bit better stamina. So, Mike, I ran on his shoulder all the way around the first turn, all the way up the backstretch, all the way around the last turn. So now I've run a quarter mile, about 3-4 seconds sooner, but I had to pass the same finish line. So he edged me out. And oh my God, I was so mad at myself because I could have had a different strategy there. And I think would have had a different outcome. So the next week we ran at the district championships, which everybody got their own lane. So everybody ran an exact quarter mile. And, I beat him by a couple seconds. So, awesome. So that was I don't know if that's the story.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. It's been a long time since I've heard it, but that's the one. That was a great moment
for me. It's one I'll never forget. It really sticks out in my mind.
So it's February 1971. You and your wife, Teresa, had just gotten married. You're just 19 years old at the time. You had a job pumping gas at your local ARCO station. You see an ad in the Delaware County Daily Times for a job. You had no idea what it was, what you were going to be doing. What was going through your mind when you walked into the office and there were, 12 other guys just sitting there in the room for an interview?
Well, I was very naive, Mike. I immediately thought, I looked around and said, geez, am I going to get this job? Am I in the top 4 or 5, whatever they were? Never crossed my mind to think about, what's the job? What am I going to have to do? Right. I just thought about it competitively. And a wonderful old-time salesman by the name of Justin Greenston, old-time wearer. This was still Wearer. I went to work for Wearer first before Freda Enterprises and Vector was Wearer. And so he went through, a basic recruiting class, what we called back then. And, the Cutco knives, of course, I don't have to tell you, they're very, very, very impressive.
Right.
And I remember saying to him, during the thing, at one point I said, well, I don't know if I'm going to get the job, but I definitely want to buy a set of these knives. So, that he really loved me from that moment forward that I said that in the recruiting class. So guess what, Mike? I got the job and showed up for training. And back then the business was very different. It was a direct approach. It wasn't any phone call appointments or anything like that. But I learned the business from Justin Greenston and another great old time salesman by the name of John Demas. These were really great guys and terrific salesmen, could sell circles around me. Selling was never, I was never as good at selling as you or Adam. It was, for me, it was always the recruiting and training, and building a team that really appealed to me.
What kind of reaction did you get when you just newly married? What kind of reaction did you get from Teresa and from your family when you told them that you were going to have a job, selling knives basically door to door?
Well, from Teresa, Mike, you're going to have to be careful here or I'll start to cry. She gave me the same type of reaction that she has given me to every other idea I've ever presented to her. We'll be married 52 years next week. And she has been incredibly supportive. And she was back then. We were really naive. I mean, it never occurred to me to think anything but positive thoughts. I mean,
right.
I looked at everything in a positive way. And so did Teresa. And she still does, except my health issues. She has, I call her Dr. Teresa. She keeps me alive at this point. But yeah, she was 100% supportive. My first sale was to my mom and dad. Imagine that, Mike. And my mother bought them, and I went through the clothes like I was trained to do. And she said, yeah, okay, I'll take them. And I said, what? Really? Because I knew my mom and dad didn't have a lot of money.
Right.
And Cutco was not cheap. You know how much it was, Mike? Let me think. Let me get this right. The homemaker N8, for anybody that happens to listen to this that's currently in Cutco, was $149.95.
Wow.
That was with a walnut chest for the 8 steak knives, and a pair of the shears also included, $149.95, and they paid about $9 a month or something for it. They had their own financing, which was one of the things that sunk them. That's why we never did that. All the other guys, when we went independent, all the other guys went out immediately and got financing. I wasn't interested. We look for a smaller average order, higher closing ratio, and most importantly, more presentations per rep, because they felt better about it. They weren't trying to half Nelson, their grandmother into buying a set. Couple knives, great. That's a nice little sale. And guess what? All those people that initially bought a couple knives, they're all still buying a couple knives for holidays and for, the Cutco team has done a great job in broadening the product line. I'm sure you have the rest of that.
My first sale was a turning fork.
There you go.
My great aunt. Yeah.
There's not many people that can say that, Mike.
Yeah. So I can't even think of anyone that I knew in all the years I sold or trained that was their first sale, but that's what she wanted.
I don't think I ever heard of it.
That's what it was. It's funny. You said, quote, great leaders attract extraordinary people and ignite a shared passion for extreme success. Synergy sparks creativity and everyone performs at optimum. It's an almost magical formula and many factors inside and out have to be aligned for breakthrough achievement, unquote. What does that mean to you, Don? And what was it inside of you that made you that, quote, great leader at such a young age?
Well, let me answer the second part of that first, because that answer is easy, Mike. I don't really know. I just had a natural, inclination to it. The thing, I guess, came from athletics. But, I realized that for me, and this was certainly true for you, as true for you as anybody that I ever remember working with, I really cared about the people I worked with. I wanted to see them do well. I wanted to be a small little catalyst, that could help them achieve some of their goals. The old Zig Ziglar line, I'm not even going to say it because everybody knows it. But that's what, I tried to put, I guess I naturally, engaged that. I mean, I really cared about and still do care about people. And I think people could sense that about me. And that's why I love the name of your podcast, because I really found that the bigger the goal, the bigger the challenge, the more it motivated people, and it, keyword inspired. It inspired people. And so I never used the stick. I always used the carrot. And I used to do everything I could do to make that carrot more appealing. And I can tell you, Mike, you've probably heard me talk about this. The person who I'm talking about knows who he is. I'm not going to say his name. I don't want to, because it involves something financial. But I remember, every year they would bring in all the bonus checks into my office. The regular checks, we had a computer stamp my signature on them because there'd be, thousands of them going out in the summertime, especially. But at the end of the year, I wanted to sign all the bonus checks, and it would start out 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, 12,000, so on. And one year I signed one for one guy. It was a $195,000 bonus check. Now, in today's world, we hear all about these, IPOs and all that kind of stuff. But back in the day, this would have been 96, maybe 95, 96. It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I felt so good about it. I really felt, that's when I felt like I had arrived. When I had a person working with me. Well, the first one to make $100,000 a year. That was Mike Lancelot. But this one, $195,000. That was just his bonus at the end of the year.
Incredible.
I think he earned something like $350, $400 up to that point. So I just felt I was glowing about it, and I called him up and thanked him for giving me the opportunity to sign a $195,000 bonus check.
I can't even imagine the feeling that was going in your mind.
It was awesome. It really was awesome. And it was, it was part of what happened in Vector, Mike. And I will be honest, the early years were hard. It was very hard on Teresa and I financially. But as I mentioned before, she stayed behind me all the way. But when you saw it turn and others started to do well, then the motivation was there to just continue on. I did reach a point where I became bored with it. I had the long-term goal of $100 million, and we passed that, and the board directors gave me a beautiful plaque and a little bonus I got for that. But it was seeing others succeed and seeing guys that have families and own homes and have 2 cars, and the kids are doing well, and all drawing from this business that I had created. And so it was a marvelous, wonderful thing. And I'm still searching to do it again. I feel like I'm young enough, and it's hard to find. It's hard to find all of those factors. Few people get to do it twice. And that's why you see, Elon Musk, I guess, has done it a couple times, but he's had a lot of things he's done that, did not work out too well.
Right. And a lot of times you don't hear about those things. You just hear sometimes about the ones that really went well. Yeah. But there's people that are successful. We've talked about this a lot, talked about it with Vector. You fail a lot before you succeed, and that's just normal.
Yep. Absolutely. It's all part of it.
Absolutely. You're right. So you got the job selling Cutco. We're going to go back and forth a little bit here. It's obviously, you talked about, it's not like it is now. Back, when you sold, and even when I sold, it wasn't even close, to what you went through. Things were much different in 1971 Cutco world. Tell the audience, if you would, a little bit about the job back then, how, what you learned from it ended up shaping the future of the business where you changed it.
Well, I learned what a wonderful product Cutco was, but I also learned that the Wherever company, which at the point I joined in 71, I think was about 80 years old. Like, it was a very old company selling cookware, Wherever pots and pans. And Cutco came from suggestions by the Wherever pots and pans salesman. It was all men back then. That they needed another product to sell, and that's what Alcoa, who owned Wherever, joined forces with another Western PA company called Case Cutlery. They're in, I want to say, Bradford, PA, just below the border. So you got Olean, where Outcast was, and then Bradford. Well, Outcast wasn't there yet, but Bradford was right here, and that's where one of the top cutlery companies in the world called Case Cutlery was. So Alcoa went to Case and said, "We want to make a high quality set of cutlery," and they formed a joint venture. So you had Al from Alcoa and CAS from Case. So they made a company called Alcast. And Alcast produced Cutco Cutlery. And I think the first year they did it was 49. I was born in 51. So it was a pretty old company by the time I got there. But so they had carried forward the old marketing strategy, which was to sell product to single working women. Now, again, please, all the young women that are watching this right now, understand that this was not my idea, and I changed it eventually when I could. But so women typically, I want to say back then, I think less than 10% of all people on college campuses were women. Now the majority are women. But most young girls graduated from high school and went to work. And of course, we didn't have computers, so there was a need for, clerical and secretarial support work. And that's what they did. And they made good money. I remember when I graduated high school, and boy, a lot of the girls were getting new cars, and, they always had money, and they did great early on, right out of high school. So that was where somebody in Wherever decided that we don't want to sell to married people because they have kids, and this was before most middle class people were struggling. They didn't have money in the bank, they didn't have great affluence, so the strategy was to sell to the single girls for something called, and again, I just have to apologize again. This is old stuff, ladies, and it's not. I'm sure Mike and I don't buy into any of this stuff anymore. But there was a thing called a hope chest. In fact, my first Christmas gift to Teresa was a hope chest, and the idea being that a young woman would, get things and keep it in the hope chest for when she got married. I mean, I'm having a hard time not laughing. My grandchildren, my granddaughters see this, they're going to really give me help. So that was the strategy. Well, you find these single working women, nurses were great because you could find nurses during the day, during the week, because they had to work around the clock. And that was the strategy. And that was the same strategy they brought forth into Cutco when they launched Cutco. And the two aforementioned men, Justin Greenston and John Demas, this was how they made their living and paid their mortgage and, made their car payments, was by selling products to single working women. And what I realized, and one thing that I guess I did have, I hope I still do, Mike, is that I'm observant, I don't carry forward bias. Most people, they carry forward a bias so that when they look at something, they see it in the way that conforms with the bias that they have. But unfortunately, sometimes the bias is incorrect, so they're not evaluating properly. And when I got going with my office, I realized that the majority of the sales were being made, first of all, for me in my personal selling, probably 40% of the sales I made were to the mothers of the girls that I was pitching. I made no attempt to sell the mothers at all, but they watched, they wanted to know what's going on with their daughter, and a lot of them purchased, and there was no effort at all. So when I got to the point where I was calling the shots, which was, I guess, when we first started Freda Enterprises, I made the shift to selling to the homeowner. In fact, what we started to do, which I'm so embarrassed about this, Mike. When we had girls, before we made this change, when young women would call up on the ad, there was no internet or anything. If we had a young woman who answered the phones, and if a girl called, she was to tell them the job was full. If a guy called, she'd set him up. So that was how stupid, we were. But I have at least the escape hatch to say, this is what I was trained, and as soon as I could do anything about it, I did. So we made that shift. And this included, which is something we had already touched upon. And if I'm going too long here, Michael, stop.
No, you're doing great. This is awesome.
I mentioned earlier that so I was a division manager in Wareham. There were 100 or so of them, I want to say. No, there were about 40 of them, and then there was other people that they got. So there was about 125 companies selling Cutco when I started Freda Enterprise. My last year wherever, as a division manager, I was a national champion division manager, and I went into Freda Enterprises, my own company. And the first thing I did was shift this orientation. The target market became homeowners. Our plan was to lower the average order. And of course, we had credit cards that people could use, but we went after a different market. And we stopped doing the direct door-to-door approach, which most people, even at that time, didn't want to do. There are people that do it now. They sell, electricity and solar and stuff, and they go door to door. I don't know. First of all, nobody's home in the daytime, because everybody works in the households. I don't know how they do it, but anyway, we made the shift away from it, and we started to bring young women onto the team, and there were some fabulous, as you know, Mike, you competed with them, really strong, sales professionals, and there are still today in Vector, outstanding. And then they moved into management as well. And so now I would guess that, I don't know this, it's just my guess. I'll find out. But I would say maybe it's 60-40. I think managers are still mostly guys in Vector, but it's a very substantial group of young women professionals that are managing office, including division managers too. I don't know if any women have made it all the way up yet, but hopefully they will.
One of the most driven, competitive managers that I was up against when I was a manager was a young lady named Sarah Richard. She was awesome.
Yes. I still communicate with Sarah from time to time. Really wonderful wonderful. Well, she came up under Rafael Navarro,
Yeah, she did. Mm-hmm.
and then maybe Mitch Lizette, Mitch Leger.
Yeah, Mitch.
Yeah, yeah. Mitch he was a great guy. Both of those guys were great guys. I mean, geez, we're just so lucky to have so many wonderful people around us.
So, Don, you not only had to sell that way, the door to door, but just a couple of weeks into your career, you had guys that went out with you that you were training. And, when you were still brand new. I mean, I know times
all this stuff
different.
Where'd you get all this stuff?
How did you convince people at their front door to not only let you in, but have two other men come in with you too?
Well, a couple times it was total of four. Wow. I would bring one to the door, and I'll answer your question in a second, but just to be clear, and most of the time it was one other person. That's right. The training was all in the field, other than you'd bring them into the office and teach them how to write orders. Other than that, they just watched in the field. So dumb. And so sometimes during the summer when the recruiting picked up, and I was one of the only active sales guys that they felt comfortable sending people with me. So in some cases, I had 4 kids with me in training, me plus 4.
Wow.
So I would only take one to the door. Now remember, we're going to a place, we don't have an appointment. They don't know who the hell we are. So we knock on the door. We're calling on the young woman who still lives at home with her mom and dad. And it's hard enough to get in the door by yourself. But I would have to get in, and then I would say, and I had one guy watching so they could get to see it. I'd say, by the way, I've got a few other guys in the car with me that are in training. Would you mind if they watched, if they came in? No, it's all right. So I still, at this point in time, I can't believe I did it, and I wouldn't have the courage to do it today. I guess it was, just naivety, the power of naivety, right? So, they would sit. I would tell them, sit over here, be quiet, and they would watch the presentation. I remember one. Now I'm trying to get ahead of you, Mike.
That's okay.
I remember one where we were doing the demo on like a TV stand, a food stand, like you'd put in front of you, you're watching television. And I was actually doing the demo on that. And I'm talking to the young woman, and I'm leaning on this thing, and it goes out from under me. Ooh. And I wind up in her lap, my head and chest in her lap. Thank God, all the knives fell harmlessly to the ground. They were in the holder. And so that was my most embarrassing moment selling Cutco Cutlery. But yeah, we did what we had to do. But I just thought, I had done some other things, and I'd gone through some very professional training, classroom instruction for corporate B2B selling. And I thought, why can't we do that same thing here? So, we built a really outstanding training program. And, from there, I think Vector has trained something along the lines of 3 or 4 million, done about 5 billion from the time I started the company.
Amazing. You said, quote, "Without question, for me, the greatest satisfaction and fulfillment comes from helping people to grow, learn, and succeed," unquote. I believe that when we talked about that earlier, when you mentioned about wanting to really be there and genuine caring for people, that's something that comes deep inside somebody, that you have to have that. That's just a genuine thing. You can't just wake up one day and say, "Hey, I'm going to start caring about people. Hey, I'm going to grow conscious." It just doesn't work that way. It's just the epitome of you, Don, the deep caring about people.
Well, I mean, I guess I have to say, my parents, my mom especially, was a very loving person, as was my dad. My dad had a hard time expressing it, but it was there. And I guess I learned it from them, and I learned it from coaches, that I played for, growing up. And, I mean, Michael, that could have just as easily been said about you and about, 1,000 other people, really great managers that we had in Vector. We had so many great ones. Brian Pentecost, Steve Weber, I mentioned Adam already. I mean, so many, Keith Patridge, so many that we've had.
I remember Mark Caruza.
Still brings a moment of sadness to my mind when I think about Mark.
Hard to believe he's been gone 30 years.
Yeah, wow.
I know.
It was the first time we lost, for the benefit of your viewers. Mark was killed in an automobile accident. And I went to his funeral, and his mom was there, and she talked my ear off about, all that she felt Mark gained from his experience in Vector. And it was very, very emotional for me, and a very wonderful, in that sense, a wonderful thing. It was so sorry, so sad to lose him. Just like that, just instant, get a phone call. Mark Cruz was in a bad automobile accident.
I know.
Great.
That's what this tells us. We take life for granted so much.
Yeah.
And it can change
so many things. You don't appreciate it until you don't have it.
Yeah. You were in college, I believe, to become a coach and a teacher. And, once you started selling Cutco, all of that changed. Did you foresee at the time, when you were selling Cutco, that this is something that you wanted to do for your career, or were you thinking maybe this could be a great stepping stone to something else?
Certainly the latter. I never considered it would be my career, because early on, I didn't understand that the theme of what you and I have been talking about today is, success through helping others. When I first joined the Cutco business, I was a sales rep. I did have guys that followed me around a little here and there, but it wasn't, to me, it's when it's a long-term influential relationship, where you work with the guy. I mean, Mike Lancelot, I hired when he was, I guess, a junior in college, did his initial training for him and worked with him until I retired, and Mike became a vice president under me for a while. And then he and Don Muir, I split the country up when I left to give them both, able to focus more. It was hard doing what I did. I was on an airplane all the time, back and forth across the country. So it's a secret that's, well known, right? Everybody knows this, but it's hard to put it to work.
Your Cutco career started in February of 71. 10 months later, November 1st, you're promoted to district manager, which you said was called a field counselor at the time. I know your former manager, I think you talked about Greeny, he had some health issues. But I'm sure that there was, someone, more experienced than someone who'd been in the business for 10 months to become a district manager. Was it your drive, your passion, your leadership skills that led your region manager, Vito Brancato, to offer you such a quick promotion?
Well, God bless you, Michael. Vito was, even though he was, to use today's terms, a zone manager or a region manager, so he was several levels up above me, but he was Italian, I was Italian. That, those Italian people, they have a little bit of connection there, and so I think that he was able to see. I think he had been in the business by the time I met him, Mike, 40 years, I guess. Highly, highly experienced guy, at a wonderful, beautiful home on Long Island, Mike, and we went there. Went to a cookout. I won a cookout with the region manager, and he was right on the water, and there were train tracks on his property that he had installed that went from about 100 yards from the water line down into the water. And then he had a dock. He had a big, boat. I mean, I guess you would say it was a yacht. And I said to him, what's the train tracks thing for? He said, well, I want to take my boat out of the water. I said, what do? We'll see that thing there? Throw that switch. It wasn't a switch, it was like a bar. And all of a sudden, there's a flatbed train car with, wooden thing to hold the boat. And it just, the boat drives up
Unbelievable.
out of the water, which is where he kept it. So, because, you can't leave your yacht in the water. So when he wanted to go boating, he would throw the thing back. It goes back down. And then we went for a ride up the Connecticut River. It was really cool.
I can't imagine how much money that cost.
Can't imagine. Well, today it would have been probably prohibitive, but Vito had done very well. He was a great motivational speaker. He was really kind of my idol early on. Rinston and Demas taught me a lot of stuff. They were good guys, and I cared for them, but they didn't really inspire me. Vito inspired me. And then there was another man by the name of Alizia, who recently passed away, that was also very influential in my development. And Al was a true professional. In fact, I'm writing a post for LinkedIn about professionalism, and Al came to mind as I was writing it. So,
some good people that you worked with.
I was very lucky, Michael. Very lucky.
And they had a strong belief in you.
I was lucky again.
Absolutely. You've impacted millions of lives, and we'll definitely talk about some of those for sure. We already have mentioned some, and one of them we just talked about was a guy from Louisiana named Mitch Leger. And when I got into management, and even before, when I was one of the top salespeople in the South, Mitch performed at such a high level, and he had this great gift of knowing how to push the right buttons with people, how to motivate them, to do better and to be better. He might not know it, but even though he wasn't my district manager, he made me both better in sales and, when I became a manager too, because he knew what to say. He just has that gift. I reached out to him recently, and he said this of you, quote, "People say Don was an innovator. Others say he was a motivator. I think his greatest gift was recognizing talent and giving people belief in themselves, then empowered that talent to succeed," unquote. A few different people early on in your career, we talked about, they saw something in you and they were right. I think you could probably have a 15-minute conversation with somebody and know in your gut that person has a gift and it needs to be shared. Where do you think that ability and gift that Mitch talks about, where does that come from?
Geez, Mike, I wish I knew. I think it's all the things that we've been talking about. I mean, I think part of it is DNA. I think part of it is upbringing. I think it's being fortunate enough at an early age to be exposed to these catalytic concepts, that make a change in how you think. I guess I would say that I do think that it's within everybody. I really do think that everyone has that ability. It's kind of like one of the things that I've realized from so many years of a cherished relationship, and I mean, it's been cherished. We never had a rough moment. I don't think we've ever had a knockdown, drag out argument, Teresa and I.
Wow.
We've had some things we disagree on, of course, sure, but we talk them through. We never yell or raise our voice. But what I learned from Teresa is that I don't really worry too much about my own well-being. I worry about her, and she doesn't worry too much about her well-being. She worries about me. So I don't feel like I have to worry about me because Teresa is doing that very effectively in a way that would be better than I ever could. And I try to keep pace with her and, do things for her. And I think that same kernel there, because without being really too crazy about it, I do think it has to do with love. It's a different kind of love, of course, that I have for my darling wife, Teresa. But, the people that came to a conference that took money out of their pocket to be there, who said with that action, I believe in this. I think I can do it, maybe. And so when I got to stand up, when I got the privilege of standing in front of a group of those people, wow. I mean, that did fire me up because I knew the potential. I've seen it, so many times. Young George Gillis, and I say young, this was when this happened. He went down to the Baltimore area for us because he had wanted to become a district manager, but all of the areas were taken, including Delaware County, Pennsylvania, by your old mentor, Art Plummer. Yeah. Art also developed George Gillis, and George went down, was the first one to open an office outside of the Philadelphia area. All of our offices up till then had been in the Philly area. And George went down there, and the next full year had the #1 office in Vector. Beat Mike Lancelot and Al DiLeonardo and Art Plummer because he didn't know the limitations. Sometimes you don't know you're not supposed to be able to do something, so you do it.
Yeah.
And the same thing, looking and realizing, every single person we meet is awesome, right? There's no such thing as an unawesome human being. There are some that are, and I don't want to get into politics, but there are some that maybe are not, where they ought to be. But everyone has awesome potential.
I agree.
That's all we tried to facilitate.
In 1972, you were inducted in the Wherever Hall of Fame. Your first full year as a district manager. In 73, you were in the #1 office in the country, #2 district. Something that I never knew about you, Don, was that in 73, after all those amazing accolades, you left the company.
I did.
What led you to that decision?
Well, Mike, it was a lot of things we've already talked about. I didn't want to be in a business that ignored women, except other than as customers. The business, the way it was run, and I'll tell you, remind me if I don't think of it, but the moment when I decided to leave, but it was very pedal to the metal. Instead of thinking through and structuring the business in the right way, they did it by sheer power, sheer commitment, aggressive, powerful approach to things. And this included very long hours. So in direct sales, in Vector, we had something called PDI. Do you know that term?
Yep.
Okay. So PDI, personal daily interview. You're supposed to talk to your people once a day. And the way they did it was you would talk to them between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. That was the nighttime PDI. And you had to be in the office to take these calls. This wasn't when there were cell phones. You could take calls anywhere. So it was Monday through Friday in the office most of the day and all of the evening recruiting and training, and then PDI till 11 o'clock. And I would leave the office at 11:05 p.m. and drive 20, 25 minutes to get home. Well, I had a young wife and a young child, and that tore me up. And then Saturday every day. And so the hours, the way they ran it was just crazy. And the district manager's pay was half of what the pay was when we started Vector. The adjustments that I made to the pay was double. I doubled it because I knew how important. I understood the district managers were the most important people in the company. With all due respect to any division managers or zone or region managers that are listening to this, district managers are the key. And everything that I did, I tried to build around that. But I got crazy. It was just too much. And July 4th of my last year, which I guess was, I don't know if it was 73 or 74, I don't remember, Mike. 4th of July, I get a phone call at 9 o'clock on 4th of July. Well, we didn't have caller ID, and it's my division manager that I had been gifted. Vito Brancato gave me Eddie Brennan as a division manager. He says, "What are you doing home?" I said, "What?" He's not coming out of the office. I said, "It's 4th of July, for God's sake. You're supposed to run a sales meeting on the 4th of July." I said, "Yeah, well, that ain't happening, Ed." And I hung the phone up. And right then I decided I'm not going to do this the rest of my life. This is what is required. As much as I love the business, as much as I had done well with the business, Hall of Fame, they painted a portrait of me, big, beautiful ring. It was great, which was another change that I immediately made as soon as I had my own company. You can't make the Hall of Fame in 1 year. That was crazy. They didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Right.
Hall of Fame has to be, has to take a career to get to the Hall of Fame, or at least multiple years. But, I was having enough trouble with it as it was, and that was just a straw that broke the camel's back. So when I came back, I structured a business that worked Monday through Saturday, every other Saturday. Every other weekend was off. Done out of the office by 6 p.m. Because I knew, one of the reasons I left, I had a responsibility to my wife and son, Donnie. I had a responsibility there. I couldn't, give all that time up with them. And I was a little bit impacted by the fact that I mentioned earlier. My dad worked second shift, so I didn't see my dad as much as all the other guys in the neighborhood, but saw their dads who worked basic 9 to 5 type schedule. So I didn't want to have broken marriages and messed up kids in the wake of the company. I wanted people to have a healthy, wonderful, engaged life with their family and balance. We talked a lot about balance in the early days.
Absolutely.
So did I answer your question, Mike?
You did answer my question. Thank you. You said, quote, "Certain key aspects of business must be constantly relearned and dealt with over and over and over again," unquote. Why do you feel that is so important in order to be successful long-term?
Well, it's human nature. And I've seen it happen so many times, Mike, where people find success and then they stop doing the things that they did that led them to success. And I used to work very, very hard to stay close to the business, even as president and CEO. When we had 500 offices across North America, I tried to be very close to the business and recognize that the fundamental laws, like gravity, whatever the corollary would be in a business model, you can't lose sight of that. And so we tried to really instill a good fundamentals in the management team, and that included these kinds of perspectives that you brought up in your question.
You and I've had many conversations about the man who recruited me into Cutco here in Memphis, who you just mentioned him, Art Plummer, such a genuine and good guy. And he was a good teacher. He had this awesome gold Corvette, and he took me driving in it once here in Memphis. I was an 18-year-old kid, and I remember going around these two corners, and it was like, oh my God, the car just stayed to the ground. I mean, we were going fast. He just wanted to show it to me, and it was just the coolest thing. He was there at the beginning along, with several others, including someone who you just mentioned, George Gillis, who also obviously came up under Art and knew him well too. I reached out to George, and he said this about you, quote, "Don recruited me in 1977. As I moved up to DM, DVM, and other positions with Vector, so much of what I learned I use today coaching Keller Williams realtors, selling eyes versus working with clients in the number one real estate company in the world, clients who deal with hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, and the Vector lessons are new concepts to them. They ring true today in a totally unrelated field," unquote. What George said there is so spot on, because I cannot tell you how many people, former reps I've had reach out to me over the years, especially now that there's social media, that tell me, what I learned in Vector helped me to become the person that I am today, successful in business, family, whatever. And I can't imagine how many times that you've heard that too. That training that we got working with the people and that teamwork and everything, it's to be used in so many different areas of life, right?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, good listening skills, right? If you get that down, you got half the battle won. So uncommon to find really good listeners that pay close attention, that see where there's disconnect and draw your attention to it. So yeah, absolutely. Art, Mike, it's one of the sadnesses that I have in my life that I can't find Art.
I know. I've tried to find him too.
After many years, he connected with George somehow, and George brought him up. We used to have a couple nights a week. We played basketball up at my house for guys I went to school with and grew up with, and George, and there were a few other Vector people. But he brought Art, and Art got out. He was not a basketball player, but he got out there. But I got you. We had a pool and a sauna there, and I got to spend time with Art, and I was so delighted to see him. And he really was. He was a Marine, as you remember, I'm sure, and he was a little more regimented. I think if he could have loosened up a little bit, it would have helped him. But he was a great guy. Loved the business. I was so sad to see that it didn't work out. I guess he went up to New England, right?
Yeah, he left here in, I believe it was December '86, and closed up. I think that you and I talked about once, he had a hard time acclimating from being in the Northeast coming to the South.
I think I would have too, probably.
Yeah. It was different.
A different mentality, no doubt about it. Not better or worse. Good, right. Wonderful. I mean, you mentioned Sarah Richard. I mean, gosh, so wonderful. The energy and the down to earth, just wonderful person. And Mitch and Raphael, all of them, and of course they're all small, the ultimate Ray Arona, so many great people in the South there.
My first district manager, Jim White in Nashville.
Jim White, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Oh my God, he was one of the real genuine people in wherever. Never really did a lot as a manager. You're probably his greatest claim to fame. but what a wonderful, great salesman. Great salesman, am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I went up several times, because I was working in Memphis on my own, but working out of the Nashville office for a few years. And I went up several times and spent the night at his house with him and his wife. I believe it was June, and just some great people.
Really, really, really liked him.
Yeah, nice guy.
You don't have any contact with him anymore, huh?
I don't.
Yeah,
I don't. Yeah,
he was a great guy.
It's hard when you lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to lose. You lose contact with people. Life goes on. It's not that you mean to do it.
No,
it just happens.
Of course not. Absolutely. I mean, I have really searched for Art. There are a few other people named Art Plummer in America. I have reached out to all of them. I don't know. He had a brother here in the Philadelphia area, but I don't remember what his first name. I have really looked for him. I would love to reconnect with him. Art was very, very instrumental in the early years of Vector. Very instrumental. It was a great guy, believed in the business, down to his bones, and shared that belief with lots of other people, including one young guy named Michael Zellner.
Yeah, I almost quit so many times in the first 6 months before he left, and he wouldn't let me. I mean, I wasn't very good when I started, and he just would not let me quit. And, I remember when he was leaving here, he said, "Hey, I have about 5 reps and you're one of them and you're the youngest. I want you, if you can, to try to stay in contact with these people." And, and I did for a while, and, but it sort of dwindled off. But, he was instrumental, because if I had quit all the way, I never would have picked it back up again, in early 88 after taking most of 87 off, when Jim White reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're starting up, the Southern Zone." And that's how it all started again.
Wasn't that nice? Wasn't that nice that he reached out to you?
Yeah, it was great. Don, what do you think is the biggest obstacle that you've had to overcome in life?
Well, probably that I'm not really, really good with money. I've always looked at money as a tool, and in order to engage it properly, it has to be spent, So I was really good at spending money. That made me really good at making money. But as I got later in life, it wasn't as easy to make money. So, I guess that's the biggest regret that I have, Mike. I mean, I remember having $500,000 cash in a money market account. Didn't know what to do with it. Didn't really understand investing. Never occurred to me to buy real estate. And I had a very good CPA, a very good financial guy. But the truth of the matter is they were afraid. They didn't make strong recommendations to me because they were afraid. I think they were a little intimidated. So I would say that I wish I'd handled my money better. I think there might be one or two other people out there that feel that way.
Yeah, me included. Yeah. I have so much more that I want to talk to you about, and because we're just really getting to the beginning, the end of, 73 and going to go forward here to talk about, how Freda Enterprises and Vector got started. I'd love for you to come back for part 2.
Sure, Mike. It'd be my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been wonderful reminiscing, and I can't wait to go forward because there's so much more great stuff to talk about, Don.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. I'll see you soon.